I am Garrett, 30 years old, and until last month, I was rebuilding my life as a software developer in my childhood home after a devastating layoff. That security vanished when my father Theodore dropped a bombshell over dinner. You have 1 week to get your stuff out. Your brother Travis owns that house now. The property I had renovated, maintained, and believed would be mine had been secretly signed over to my golden child brother. Before I tell you how I turned this betrayal into the most satisfying moment of my life, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama stories resonate with you. My journey to that devastating dinner announcement began 3 years ago. I had been working at Next Tech Solutions, a promising startup in Seattle, where I had climbed to senior developer within 4 years. The company had been my dream job, offering creative freedom and excellent compensation. I had built a comfortable life in a downtown apartment regularly, putting money aside for eventual homeownership and maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Then came the acquisition. A larger tech corporation bought Nextech, and the immediate restructuring left me and 40% of the staff without jobs. The severance package was decent, but the tech industry was experiencing a significant downturn. Interview after interview ended with, "We really like your experience, but we are on a hiring freeze." After 4 months of unsuccessful job hunting and watching my savings dwindle, I made a practical decision. I called my father Theodore Harrington, a retired military officer with the stern demeanor to match. Our relationship had always been complicated. Respect, rather than warmth, defined our interactions. "Dad, I am thinking about moving back home temporarily. While I get back on my feet," I said, trying to sound confident rather than desperate. His response was predictable. "About time you showed some sense with your money. That apartment was draining you dry." What made the decision easier was a conversation we had years earlier when my mother was still alive. They had both made it clear that the family home, a spacious 4-bedroom colonial in a charming Massachusetts suburb, would eventually be mine. "Your brother Travis has his eyes set on California. This place would be wasted on him," my father had said. "We always figured you would raise your family here someday." Travis, my older brother by 2 years, had always been the golden child. Star quarterback and high school business degree from an Ivy League university, and now a successful investment banker in Los Angeles. He had the perfect wife, Madison, and was living the California dream my parents had somehow decided was more impressive than my more modest but fulfilling life in technology. Moving back felt like regression, but I tried to frame it positively. The house needed work. My father had let maintenance slide after my mother passed away from cancer 5 years earlier. I could contribute by fixing the place up while job searching and saving on rent. The first 2 months went by smoothly. I established a routine job applications in the morning, house projects in the afternoon, and dinner with Dad in the evening. I replaced the leaking bathroom fixtures, repainted the peeling exterior trim, and upgraded the ancient HVAC system when it failed during a cold snap. Each project cost me thousands from my dwindling savings, but I considered it an investment in my future home. "You are bringing this old place back to life," Dad commented, the closest thing to praise I ever received from him. Meanwhile, Travis called occasionally, always with updates about his latest bonus or vacation. During one call on speakerphone, he asked, "How is the old house holding up?" "Garrett is fixing it up nicely," Dad replied, "putting in a new heating system and everything." "Good to hear," Travis said with a dismissive tone. "It will definitely help the property value down the road." Something about his comment struck me as odd, but I dismissed it. Why would Travis care about the property value of a house that would eventually be mine? As months stretched into a year, I finally landed a remote position with a promising startup. The salary was lower than my previous job, but it allowed me to stay in the family home while rebuilding my career and savings. I continued improving the house, installing custom shelving in the living room, upgrading the kitchen appliances, and adding smart home technology throughout. I noticed a shift in Dad's behavior around the 14-month mark of my stay. He began receiving more frequent calls from Travis, which he always took in private. Travis, who had visited maybe twice a year previously, suddenly found reasons to stop by every couple of months. During these visits, I noticed him examining the house improvements with unusual interest, asking questions about the cost, and commenting on potential alternatives. That shelving is nice, but have you considered built-ins? Madison loves those in our place, he would say. Or smart thermostats are great, but we went with a whole home automation system. I also caught him taking photos of various rooms when he thought no one was looking. When questioned, he casually mentioned, "Just showing Madison what you have done with the place." Dad and Travis also began having private conversations that would abruptly end when I entered the room. Once I overheard Travis say, "But you promised," before they noticed my presence and quickly changed the subject. The strangest moment came when I mentioned my plans to convert the basement into a home office. Travis interjected before Dad could respond. I would not invest too much in permanent changes just yet. When I asked what he meant, he backpedaled. Just saying, keep your options open career-wise. You might get an offer somewhere else. What I did not realize then was that while I was pouring my heart, soul, and savings into the family home, secret conversations were happening behind my back. Conversations that would shatter the security I thought I had rebuilt. The day everything fell apart started normally enough. It was a Friday in late September, and I had just wrapped up my work week. Travis had arrived for what he called a surprise visit the night before, and Dad had announced we would have a special family dinner. I spent the afternoon preparing my mother's lasagna recipe, a family favorite that I had perfected over the years. There was something comforting about maintaining this tradition, a connection to Mom that I cherished. The house filled with the aroma of garlic, tomatoes, and herbs as I set the dining room table with the good china, assuming this was just another family get-together. Travis seemed unusually jovial, offering to open a bottle of expensive wine he had brought. A celebration calls for the good stuff, he said with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. What are we celebrating? I asked, setting down the steaming lasagna. Dad cleared his throat as we all sat down. Travis has some news, he said, looking at my brother with unmistakable pride. Travis straightened in his chair. Madison and I are expecting twins in February, he announced. A boy and a girl. That is amazing news, I said, genuinely raising my glass. Congratulations. The news explained Travis's increased interest in family matters lately. Becoming a parent often rekindled family connections. I started mentally planning what I could craft for my future niece and nephew, perhaps a custom wooden toy chest or rocking chairs. There is more, Dad said, his tone shifting to something more formal. He looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. With Travis starting a family, we have made some decisions. The way he said we struck me as odd. What decisions would Dad and Travis be making together that would warrant this formal dinner announcement? Dad continued, not quite meeting my eyes. Travis needs a place with space and good schools to raise his family. California is too expensive, and he and Madison have decided to move back east. Travis nodded, swirling his wine. Madison has family in Boston, and my firm has an office there. It makes sense for us now. Something cold settled in my stomach, a premonition of what was coming next. The thing is, Garrett, Dad said, his voice hardening with resolve, Travis will need this house. It has plenty of room for a growing family, and the school district is excellent. I put down my fork slowly. Need the house. You mean, visit more often? Dad shook his head. No, son. I mean live here, permanently. The room seemed to tilt slightly. But this house, you always said it would be mine someday. I have been investing in it, improving it. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Plans change, Dad said dismissively. Travis has a family on the way. You are still single. What are you saying exactly? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dad looked at Travis, who gave a small nod of encouragement. I have signed the house over to Travis. The paperwork was finalized 3 months ago. 3 months. While I was installing new kitchen cabinets and repairing the deck, the house had already been given to my brother. You did what? My voice came out barely above a whisper. It makes the most sense, Travis interjected smoothly. With the twins coming, we need the stability. And you are so good with technology, you can work from anywhere. The casual way he dismissed my attachment to our family home made my blood boil, but I fought to maintain composure. Why was I not consulted about this? I have put thousands of dollars into improvements here. It was my house to give, Dad said firmly, and I decided Travis needs it more. When were you planning to tell me? I asked my food now forgotten. We are telling you now, Travis said with a plastic smile. And do not worry about the improvements. We really appreciate them. The new HVAC system especially will be great for the babies. The audacity of his gratitude for what was essentially my stolen investment rendered me momentarily speechless. You have 1 week to get your stuff out, Dad announced, cutting into his lasagna as if he had not just detonated a bomb in my life. Travis and Madison need time to get settled before the babies arrive. 1 week, I repeated in disbelief. I live here. I have been paying for repairs, for groceries, for utilities. You cannot just throw me out with a week's notice. It is more than fair, Travis countered. And hey, you can visit any time. You will always be welcome as an uncle. The condescending tone was the final straw. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor I had refinished with my own hands. You have been planning this for months, haven't you? I looked at Travis. All those visits, the questions about the improvements, the photos, you were inventorying what you were getting for free. Travis had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, but Dad just looked annoyed. Do not be dramatic, Garrett, he said. This is what is best for the family. Which family? I asked bitterly. Because it is clearly not me. I turned to leave the room, needing air, needing space, when Travis called after me. We really do appreciate everything you have done with the place. Madison already has ideas for the nursery colors. I stopped in the doorway, not turning around. One question. When you say the house is Travis's, now, what exactly does that include? Everything, Dad replied. The property and all its fixtures. I nodded slowly, a plan already forming in my mind. Good to know. Enjoy your dinner. As I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom, their muffled voices resumed below, probably discussing how unreasonable I was being. But in that moment, as the initial shock gave way to cold clarity, I made a decision. If they wanted the house, they could have it, but they would learn exactly what everything entailed. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake in my childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars my mother had helped me place on the ceiling when I was 8. Each one represented a constellation she had taught me to identify. Orion's belt, the Big Dipper, Cassiopeia. Always look up when you feel lost, she used to say. The stars will guide you home. Home. The word echoed hollowly now. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. I began making a list of everything I had contributed to the house since moving back. The HVAC system, $12,000. Kitchen appliances, $8,000. Smart home technology, $3,500. Bathroom renovations, $7,000. The list grew longer, the total more staggering with each entry. Over $30,000 of my savings had gone into a house that had been secretly signed away while I was installing the very improvements that would benefit its new owners. Memories flooded back as I documented each project. Installing the ceiling fans with Dad holding the ladder, his rare words of approval when we finished. Your mother would have liked these, he had said. The closest thing to an emotional moment we had shared since her funeral. Mom. What would she have thought of this betrayal? She had always been the mediator between Dad's rigid expectations and my more creative nature. She had been the one to suggest I would be the natural inheritor of the house given Travis's ambitions elsewhere. You have your father's hands, but my heart, she used to tell me. This house needs both to thrive. I found myself opening the family photo album I had digitized last year. There she was, standing proudly in front of the rose bushes I had helped her plant when I was 15. The same rose bushes I had carefully transplanted and nurtured back to health after years of Dad's neglect. The anger that had sustained me through dinner gave way to a crushing wave of grief. This was not just about property or money. This was the erasure of a future I had believed in, a betrayal of promises spoken and unspoken, the casual discarding of my place in the family narrative. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my best friend since college. Hey, how did family dinner go? I had mentioned to him earlier that Travis was visiting and that Dad had called for a special dinner. Marcus had joked that maybe Dad was finally going to acknowledge my contributions to the house. I called him, not caring about the early hour. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the time. What happened, he asked, immediately knowing from my call at this hour that something was wrong. The story poured out of me in fragmented sentences and barely suppressed emotions. Marcus listened without interruption, his silence on the other end growing heavier with each new detail. "They cannot do this to you," he finally said, anger evident in his voice. "You have tenant rights at minimum. They cannot just throw you out in a week." "Legally they probably can," I replied. "Dad's name was on the deed, and now it is Travis's. I have no written agreement, no lease." "Move in with me," Marcus offered without hesitation. "I have the spare room. Stay as long as you need." His immediate support loosened something in my chest, and to my horror, I felt tears threatening. I had not cried since Mom's funeral, but now the dam was breaking. I just keep thinking about all the work I put into this place I managed. Not just the money, but the time, the care. "Remember when you helped me refinish the hardwood floors last summer? 3 days of backbreaking work and respirator masks," Marcus recalled. "Your brother is going to love those floors, the ungrateful jerk." As dawn broke, I began the painful process of sorting through my belongings. What to take, what to leave behind. Every object held memories. The bookshelf in the corner that Mom and I had built together during my high school years. The desk where I had done my homework, then college assignments, and recently my remote work. When I opened my closet to begin packing clothes, I found a box of old financial records I had organized for Dad after Mom died. Curious, I opened it and found years of house-related documents, property tax statements, insurance policies, and maintenance records. And there in a folder labeled House Improvements, I found something unexpected, a handwritten note from my mother to my father, dated just weeks before her death. "Ted, please remember our agreement about the house. Garrett has always loved this home and will care for it the way we have. It should go to him when the time is right. Travis has his path and it leads elsewhere. Honor this for me." The discovery sent a fresh wave of betrayal through me. Dad had not just betrayed me, he had betrayed Mom's dying wishes. Around 7, I heard movement in the hallway. Travis emerged from the guest room, already dressed in pressed chinos and a button-down shirt, looking like he was heading to a casual business meeting, rather than continuing to upend my life. "Morning," he said with forced cheerfulness. "Coffee." I stared at him, this brother, who had once taught me to ride a bike and defended me from neighborhood bullies. When had he become this stranger who could take my home without a flicker of real remorse? "I will make my own," I replied coldly. "Look," he said, following me down to the kitchen, "I know this is sudden, but it really is the best solution for everyone. Madison and I need the space, and you, well, you are more adaptable. You always have been." That was Travis speak. "For your life and career are less important than mine, always had been." "I am curious," I said, measuring coffee grounds with precise movements. "When exactly did Dad decide to give you the house?" Travis hesitated, confirming my suspicion that this plan had been in the works for much longer than I had been told. "We started discussing it about a year ago," he admitted, "when Madison and I first started trying for a baby." "A year ago?" "When I was installing the new water heater and repainting the exterior, when I was still believing the house would someday be mine." "Were you ever going to tell me, or just wait until you needed to move in?" I asked, the coffee forgotten. "Dad thought it would be easier this way," Travis said, not quite meeting my eyes. "He knew you would be emotional about it." The casual dismissal of my feelings, labeling legitimate anger as being emotional, was so typical of both Travis and Dad that it almost made me laugh. "I came by today to help you pack," Travis continued clearly, trying to move past the uncomfortable moment, and to measure the master bedroom for our furniture. The audacity was breathtaking. "Do not bother," I said. "I will handle my own packing." As Travis retreated upstairs with a measuring tape, I stood in the kitchen I had renovated, surrounded by appliances I had purchased, and felt the weight of displacement pressing down on me. This was not just about losing a house. It was about being erased from my own family narrative, replaced by a brother who had always been the protagonist in my father's story. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full force of the resentment that had been building for years. The constant comparison to Travis, the dismissal of my achievements, because they did not fit Dad's narrow definition of success, the expectation that I would always accommodate, always adjust, always settle for less. Not this time. As I heard Travis's footsteps overhead pacing out the dimensions of what would soon be his bedroom, something hardened inside me. If they wanted the house, they could have it, but I would make sure they understood exactly what they were getting, and more importantly, what they were not. By Saturday afternoon, the initial shock had begun to crystallize into something more focused. I needed perspective and potentially legal advice. I called Jessica Rivera, a friend from college who had become a real estate attorney. She agreed to meet me for coffee at a small cafe downtown away from the house, and any chance of being overheard by Travis or my father. Jessica listened intently as I laid out the situation, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as I detailed the improvements I had made and the sudden demand to vacate. "Let me make sure I understand," she said when I finished. "You have been living there for nearly 2 years, contributing significantly to the household expenses and making substantial improvements to the property, all with the understanding that the house would eventually be yours." "Yes," I confirmed. "Nothing in writing about inheritance, but I have receipts for everything I purchased and installed." She tapped her pen thoughtfully. "While the property transfer to your brother is likely legal, if your father was the sole owner, you do have some rights here. At minimum, you are a tenant, even without a formal lease. In Massachusetts, they would need to give you proper notice to vacate, typically 30 days, not 1 week. A small relief, but not enough to address the larger injustice. Additionally," Jessica continued, "there is the matter of unjust enrichment. You made these improvements with the reasonable expectation of future ownership. A court might find that your brother and father would be unjustly enriched by obtaining the value of these improvements without compensation. So I could sue them," I asked. Though the thought of dragging this into court, of publicly airing our family dysfunction, was unappealing. "You could," she confirmed, "but litigation is expensive, time-consuming, and frankly toxic for family relationships, even those already strained. Before going that route, I would suggest documenting everything and attempting negotiation." She paused, studying my expression. "That said, I am not seeing a strong desire to sue your family. Am I reading that correctly?" I nodded slowly. "Suing them would just prove what Dad already believes, that I am weak, that I need to fight for what Travis gets handed to him. Besides, even if I won, the relationship would be unsalvageable." "Then what do you want, Garrett? What would justice look like to you?" Her question struck at the heart of what had been forming in my mind since the previous night. It was not about keeping the house anymore. That ship had sailed. It was about making sure that Travis and my father understood the consequences of their actions, that they could not simply discard me and benefit from my years of work and investment. "I want them to realize exactly what they are getting," I said slowly, "and what they are not." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "I am not following. When Dad said Travis now owns the house and everything in it, he was referring to the structure and its fixtures. But there is a legal distinction between fixtures and personal property, right?" A slow smile of understanding spread across Jessica's face. "Yes, there is. Fixtures are items permanently attached to the property that are intended to be part of it. Built-in bookshelves, ceiling lights, plumbing fixtures. Personal property, on the other hand, remains the possession of the individual who purchased it, unless specifically included in the property transfer. And the line between fixture and personal property can sometimes be subjective," I asked. "It can indeed," Jessica confirmed. "The general rule is that if removing an item would cause damage to the property, it is considered a fixture. But there are gray areas, and much depends on the intention at installation and the method of attachment. So if I were to remove items that I purchased and installed, as long as I did not damage the structural integrity of the house, you would be within your rights to take what is legally yours." Jessica finished for me. "Just be careful about crossing the line into what could be considered fixtures and document everything meticulously." I spent the rest of the afternoon researching property law and the distinction between fixtures and personal property. The more I read, the clearer my plan became. I called Benjamin Wyatt, a contractor who had helped me with some of the larger house projects. "I need a professional assessment of what can be removed from a property without causing structural damage," I explained when we met at a local hardware store the next day. Benjamin, a practical man in his 50s with decades of construction experience, did not ask many questions. "This about your dad's house?" he he asked simply. News traveled fast in small towns. Yes, I admitted. It is not going to be mine after all. He nodded thoughtfully. Sorry to hear that. You put a lot of work into that place. That is why I need to know what I can take with me legally. Benjamin scratched his beard. Well, appliances are straightforward. Refrigerator, washer-dryer. Those are usually considered personal property, unless specifically included in a sale. Light fixtures can be removed, as long as you replace them with basic functional ones. Same with ceiling fans. We walked through the theoretical removal of various items, with Benjamin providing expert insight on what could be disconnected without damaging the house itself. By the end of our conversation, I had a clear understanding of what was legally mine to take. The next step was documentation. I spent Sunday photographing every improvement I had made, locating receipts, and creating a detailed inventory with dates of purchase and installation. I organized everything into 3 categories. Clearly personal property items in the gray area that could reasonably be considered mine, and true fixtures that would have to stay. On Monday morning, I received a call from my father, his voice gruff with impatience. Travis says you have barely started packing. The week is already ticking by Garrett. I am handling it my way, I replied calmly. I will be out by Friday as demanded. Good, he said, seemingly relieved by my compliance. Travis and Madison need to start setting up the nursery. They have got a lot to do before the twins arrive. I am sure they do, I said, my tone neutral. By the way, I will need a few professional movers to help with some of the larger items. I assume that will not be a problem. As long as they do not damage anything, Dad replied. The house belongs to Travis now. Oh, I am well aware of who owns the house, I assured him, and I would not dream of damaging Travis's property. After ending the call, I contacted a moving company and scheduled them for Thursday. Then I called Marcus, who had offered not only his spare room, but his assistance with whatever I needed. I have a plan, I told him, but I will need help with inventory and organization. Count me in, Marcus said without hesitation. Whatever you are planning, it has got to be better than just rolling over and letting them take advantage of you. The next few days were a blur of activity. I worked remotely during the day, then spent evenings meticulously documenting and preparing. By Wednesday night, everything was in place for the final phase of my plan. As I walked through the house that evening, touching walls that held decades of memories, I felt a strange sense of calm, replacing the initial hurt and anger. This house had been my anchor, my connection to my mother, my vision of future stability. Losing it was painful, yes, but perhaps it was also freeing me from the weight of seeking approval I would never receive. My father found me in the kitchen making a simple dinner of sandwiches. You seem to be taking this better than I expected, he observed, a note of suspicion in his voice. What choice do I have? I replied with a shrug. You and Travis made your decision without me. I am just adapting, like I always do. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my resignation. That is a mature way to look at it. You will land on your feet. You always do. The irony of him praising my resilience while actively testing it was not lost on me, but I simply nodded. I always do, I agreed. Tomorrow would test just how well Travis and my father could land on theirs. Thursday morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect early autumn day. I had taken the day off work, citing moving preparations to my understanding manager. By 8:30, a large moving truck pulled up in front of the house, followed by a team of 4 professional movers, led by Carlos, a no-nonsense foreman who had been thoroughly briefed on the unusual nature of the job. Everything on this inventory list is coming with me, I explained, handing him the meticulously prepared document. I have grouped items by room for efficiency. Carlos reviewed the list with raised eyebrows but asked no questions. His team had seen plenty of unusual moving situations, and this was just another job to them. My father had left early for his weekly golf game, conveniently absent for what was about to unfold. I had timed it this way, deliberately knowing his Thursday routine was sacrosanct. Travis had returned to Boston for a work commitment, planning to come back Friday with Madison to help me finish up, which I interpreted as, make sure I was actually leaving. The movers began in the kitchen, disconnecting and carefully removing the high-end refrigerator, dishwasher, gas range, and microwave I had purchased 18 months earlier. The sleek quartz countertops would stay. They were clearly fixtures, but the expensive faucet and garbage disposal I had installed came with me. "We will need to cap the water lines and ensure everything is safe," Carlos noted professionally. I had already purchased basic replacement fixtures for essential elements like faucets, ensuring the house would have minimum functionality. Next came the living room, where the movers carefully dismantled and packed the custom entertainment system I had designed and built. The wall-mounted television sound system and media components were all boxed up efficiently. "What about these built-in shelves?" one of the movers asked, pointing to the beautiful oak shelving unit that spanned one wall. "Those stay," I confirmed, having determined they were true fixtures. "But all the smart home technology comes with me." Methodically, the team removed every smart thermostat doorbell camera, security sensor, and automated lighting control throughout the house. In the bathrooms, they carefully extracted the rainfall showerhead jetted tub components and high-end fixtures I had installed, replacing them with the basic models I had purchased. The removal of the ceiling fans from every bedroom took particular care, with the movers installing simple light fixtures in their place to ensure the rooms would not be left in darkness. In the basement, they disconnected and removed the water softener system and backup generator I had installed after a particularly bad winter storm. The central elements of the HVAC system had to remain as true fixtures, but the smart control system and advanced filtration components were mine to take. Throughout the process, I documented everything with photographs and videos, ensuring there could be no question later about what had been removed and what had been left in functioning condition. By mid-afternoon, curious neighbors had begun to notice the systematic emptying of house components. Mrs. Abernathy from next door approached as the movers were loading the water heater I had replaced last winter. "Garrett, dear, are you moving out?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. She had been a friend of my mother's and had brought me casseroles for weeks after Mom's passing. "Yes, Mrs. Abernathy. The house belongs to Travis now," I explained. "Dad signed it over to him for his growing family." Her eyes widened in surprise. "But all the work you have put into this place, all the improvements, are coming with me?" I finished for her with a smile. "Travis gets the house, but I get to keep what I paid for." Understanding dawned on her face, followed by a surprisingly mischievous smile for a woman in her 70s. "Your mother would have approved," she said, patting my arm. "She never did think it was fair how your father favored Travis." By 6 in the evening, the moving truck was fully loaded with appliances, electronics fixtures, and components that represented thousands of dollars and countless hours of my labor and investment. The house stood intact, but drastically reduced to its basic functionality, a shell of what it had been just hours before. I walked through each room one final time, ensuring nothing had been damaged in the removal process. The house was still structurally sound, with working basic plumbing and lighting. It was technically a livable house, just not the upgraded, modernized home that Travis and my father thought they were getting. In the kitchen, I left the bottle of expensive scotch Travis had brought to celebrate his news, along with a note: "Congratulations on your new home. I have taken only what legally belongs to me. Enjoy the house. Garrett." As a final touch, I left a copy of my complete inventory with receipts attached on the dining room table. There could be no question that everything I had taken was purchased with my own money and legally mine to remove. Carlos approached me as the last of my personal belongings were being loaded into my SUV, which would follow the moving truck to Marcus's place. "All done according to plan," he confirmed. "Everything removed safely, and basic replacements installed where needed." I thanked him and his team for their professionalism and discretion, adding a generous tip for their exceptional work. As they drove away with the material evidence of 2 years of my life's work and savings, I felt a strange lightness. The house had been more than a building to me. It had been a connection to my mother, a vision of future stability, a physical manifestation of my place in the family. Now that connection was severed, but perhaps that severance was also setting me free. I took one last look at the colonial house where I had grown up, where I had expected to raise my own family someday. Then I got into my car and drove away, leaving behind not just a house, but the weight of seeking approval I would never receive. Friday morning found me setting up my new temporary home in Marcus's spare room, arranging the personal items I had brought with me. The bulk of my removed house components were being stored in a climate-controlled facility until I could determine their fate, sell them, use them in a future home, or some combination of both. You know they are going to lose their minds when they see what you did right, Marcus commented, as he helped me organize my clothes in the small closet. Probably, I acknowledged. But everything I took was legally mine. I have the documentation to prove it. Around 11, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Travis was calling. I let it go to voicemail, then listened, as his message played, his voice transitioning from confusion to disbelief to outrage. Garrett, what the hell? I just got to the house and… Where is everything? The refrigerator is gone. The stove is gone. There are basic light fixtures where the ceiling fans used to be. Call me back immediately. I set the phone down without returning the call. 10 minutes later, it rang again, my father this time. His voicemail was more directly accusatory. What have you done to Travis's house? This is unacceptable behavior. Call me right now. By noon, both Travis and my father had called multiple times. I finally texted them both the same message. Everything I removed was purchased with my money and is legally my property. I left basic replacements where necessary for functionality. The inventory list on the dining room table details everything with receipts. This triggered an immediate call from Travis, which I decided to answer. You cannot just strip a house like this, he shouted, without preamble. The refrigerator, the stove, the water heater, these are part of the house. Actually, appliances are considered personal property unless specifically included in a property transfer, I replied calmly, recalling Jessica's legal advice. I purchased them, and they remain mine. What about the light fixtures, the faucets, the ceiling fans? His voice rose with each item listed. Also my property. I left functional basic replacements, which is more than legally required. There was a moment of stunned silence before Travis spoke again, his voice lower but seething with anger. Dad and I are coming to see you. Where are you staying? That is not necessary, I replied. Everything has been removed legally and properly. There is nothing to discuss in person. This is not over, Garrett, Travis threatened before hanging up. I had barely set my phone down when it rang again, my father this time. I took a deep breath and answered. What were you thinking? He demanded. You have left Travis with an empty shell of a house. I was thinking that I would take what belongs to me, I replied evenly. The house is not empty. It has functioning plumbing, electricity, and basic fixtures. What it does not have are the $30,000 worth of improvements and appliances that I purchased with my own money. Those were part of the house, Dad insisted. No, they were not. They were my personal property. I have consulted with a real estate attorney who confirmed my right to remove them. I could practically hear him seething on the other end of the line. This is how you repay our generosity. We gave you a place to stay when you needed it. The audacity of his statement finally broke through my calm facade. Generosity. You let me live in what I believed would be my house someday, while I poured my savings into improving it all, while you had already secretly signed it over to Travis. That is not generosity, Dad. That is manipulation and deceit. You are being childish, he snapped. Travis needs this house for his family. He cannot afford to replace everything you took. And there it was, the real issue. Travis, with his investment banking job and supposedly successful career, could not afford to furnish the house properly. The golden child's financial situation might not be as golden as portrayed. That sounds like a Travis problem, I replied coolly. Maybe he should have thought about that before accepting a house he knew I had invested in. Your mother would be ashamed of you, Dad said, hitting below the belt as a last resort. The accusation might have wounded me deeply in the past, but now I had evidence to the contrary. Actually, I found Mom's note to you about the house, the one where she explicitly stated it should go to me, not Travis. So I think we both know who she would be ashamed of. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When my father finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its fire. What note? The one in the financial records box, written a few weeks before she died. She made her wishes very clear, Dad, and you chose to ignore them. Another long pause. That was just her opinion. I had to make the practical decision. Well, I have made my practical decision too. Enjoy explaining to Travis why his new house is not move-in ready. After hanging up, I blocked both their numbers, temporarily needing space from the conflict. Marcus, who had been tactfully busying himself in another room during my calls, returned with 2 beers. From the sound of it, they are not taking it well, he observed, handing me a bottle. About as expected, I confirmed. Dad tried the "your mother would be ashamed" card. Marcus winced. Low blow. It might have worked before I found her note, specifying the house should go to me. We sat in companionable silence for a moment before Marcus spoke again. You know this is going to ripple through the entire family, right? Once people hear what happened. He was right. By Saturday evening, my phone was lighting up with messages from extended family members. Some were critical, having heard Travis and Dad's version of events. Others were surprisingly supportive. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, called to tell me she was proud of me. Your mother always worried that Theodore favored Travis too much, she said. She would have applauded you standing up for yourself. My cousin Ryan sent a text that simply read, "Legendary move. About time someone called Uncle Ted on his favoritism." Even Mrs. Abernathy from next door reached out, reporting that she had seen Travis and Madison at the house looking shell-shocked as they examined the kitchen with its missing appliances and basic fixtures. Madison kept saying, "But where will we put the nursery if we have to spend all our money on appliances?" Mrs. Abernathy reported, with poorly concealed glee. Your brother did not have an answer for her. By Sunday, Travis made an attempt at reconciliation, sending an email rather than calling. I understand. You are upset about the house, but what you did was extreme. We need to find a compromise. Madison is stressed, and this is not good for the babies. I replied simply, I am open to discussion. My terms: full reimbursement for all removed items if you want them returned, or you purchase new ones yourself. Either way, acknowledgement from both you and Dad that what you did was wrong. His response came quickly. That is not realistic. We cannot afford to replace everything, and Dad will never admit he was wrong. Then I guess you will have to get creative with your decorating, I wrote back. The situation reached its peak the following week when Dad finally swallowed his pride enough to request a meeting. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown that had been one of my mother's favorites. He looked older. Somehow the lines in his face deeper, his usual military posture slightly diminished. Travis and Madison are struggling, he said without preamble. They had budgeted for moving and baby preparations, not replacing an entire house worth of appliances and fixtures. That is unfortunate, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Perhaps they should have considered that before taking a house they knew I had invested in. Dad's jaw tightened. What do you want, Garrett? Money? What I wanted was the house that Mom intended for me to have, I said quietly. But since that is no longer possible, yes, compensation would be appropriate. $30,000 would cover my documented improvements. He blanched at the figure. That is impossible. Travis does not have that kind of money right now, and neither do I. This confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Travis's financial situation was not as solid as the family had been led to believe. The perfect life in California might have been more facade than reality. Then perhaps Travis should sell the house and buy something more within his means, I suggested, or take out a home equity loan. He cannot sell it, Dad admitted reluctantly. The transfer included a clause that he cannot sell for at least 5 years. It was for tax purposes. I could not help but laugh at the irony. So he is stuck with a house he cannot properly furnish, and you are stuck with the consequences of your decision. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my father look genuinely regretful. I never meant for this to become such a mess, he said, sounding tired. I really thought I was doing what was best for everyone. Best for Travis, I corrected. Not for me, and certainly not for what Mom wanted. He did not dispute this, which was perhaps the closest thing to an admission of wrongdoing I would ever get from him. What if he said slowly, Travis returns the house to me, and I sell it. We could split the proceeds 3 ways, you, Travis, and me. It was a concession, but still far from fair, given my investments and Mom's wishes. 50% to me, I countered, 25% each to you and Travis. And a written acknowledgement that the original transfer was done against Mom's expressed wishes. Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but instead simply nodded. I will talk to Travis. As I watched him leave, shoulders slightly stooped, I realized this was never going to be a clean or satisfying resolution. Family wounds rarely heal perfectly. But for the first time, I had stood my ground and demanded recognition of my worth. Whether they ultimately accepted my terms or not, I had changed the dynamic permanently. I was no longer the accommodating younger son who would accept whatever crumbs of approval they offered. I had drawn my line, and regardless of what came next, I had finally broken free from the pattern of always putting my needs last. 6 months later, I sat in my new apartment, a modern one-bedroom, in a converted factory building downtown. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, highlighting the custom shelving unit I had built along one wall. The same shelving design I had once installed in my father's house, but this time, undeniably mine. The apartment was furnished with a mixture of new items and carefully selected pieces I had removed from the family home. The high-end kitchen appliances had been sold to fund my new venture, .gob, a small tech consulting firm specializing in smart home integration for small businesses. The irony was not lost on me that the skills I had developed improving a house that would never be mine had become the foundation of my new career path. Sometimes what we perceive as loss becomes the catalyst for unexpected growth. Travis and I had reached an uneasy truce. After 2 months of living in a partially furnished house and struggling to afford replacements, he had finally agreed to my terms. The house was returned to my father, who sold it for a surprisingly good price, despite the housing market downturn. As agreed, I received 50% of the proceeds, which I immediately invested in my business and this apartment. The sale freed Travis and Madison from a financial burden they clearly could not shoulder. They purchased a more modest townhouse closer to Boston, where Madison's parents could help with the twins, who were born healthy and beautiful, despite the stress of the preceding months. My relationship with my father remained strained, but was evolving into something more honest. Our weekly phone calls were brief, and sometimes awkward, but they represented a new beginning based on mutual respect rather than his expectations and my desire for approval. "Your business doing well?" he asked. During our most recent call, his gruff voice attempting casualness. "It is," I replied. "I just hired my second employee last week." "Good," he said, and I could hear the effort it took him to add, "Your mother would have been proud." It was as close to an apology as I was likely to ever receive, and I chose to accept it as such. Marcus, who had been my rock throughout the ordeal, had become my first business partner. From housing me to working for me, he joked, "Life takes some weird turns." Indeed it did. What had begun as a devastating betrayal had ultimately freed me from patterns that had constrained me for years. No longer seeking approval from a father who could never fully give it. No longer measuring my worth against my brother's achievements, I was finally building a life defined by my own values and choices. The pain had not disappeared entirely. Betrayal leaves scars that fade, but never vanish completely. But alongside the lingering hurt was a new appreciation for boundaries, for self-advocacy, for the family we choose rather than the one we are born into. My chosen family had expanded beyond Marcus to include Jessica, who had provided crucial legal guidance, Benjamin the contractor, who had become a mentor and friend, and even Mrs. Abernathy, who regularly invited me for Sunday dinners and treated me like the son she never had. The money from the house sale remained largely untouched in an investment account. Perhaps someday it would become the down payment on a house, truly my own, built or renovated, according to my vision, rather than as an attempt to prove my worth to others. Or perhaps I would find other ways to create lasting value and meaning. The freedom to decide was itself a precious gift that had emerged from the wreckage of betrayal. As I arranged the framed photo of my mother in its place of honor on my desk, I remembered her words. "Always look up when you feel lost. The stars will guide you home." Home, I had learned, was not a physical structure that could be signed away by someone else's decision. It was the space we create within ourselves and with the people who truly see and value us. It was the integrity with which we face difficult choices, the boundaries we establish to protect our well-being, the resilience we develop when those boundaries are tested. I had lost a house but found myself in the process. And in that discovery was a form of homecoming more meaningful than any property deed could ever provide. Sometimes, losing what you thought was yours opens the door to finding what truly belongs to you. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who took you for granted? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of reclaiming my dignity and worth resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the most painful betrayals can lead to unexpected freedom if you have the courage to value yourself first. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to create boundaries that protect your peace.